Hey guys, Tech Rally here and welcome to the fourth lesson of Learning Vue. This is part 2 of 2 lessons focused on learning about Vue directives. This will be a relatively short lesson that will go over 3 things: Vue Model, Beyond, and shortcuts. The Vue Model directive is used to create two-way data binding for form input, text area, and select elements. Under the hood, Vue Model allows you to update data based on user input events. Let's look at an example. For this lesson, I'm going to reuse the same folder structure that I've been doing for lessons 2 and 3. You'll notice that in my index.html that I have an app Vue div container at the root element. But for now, let's just go back into app.js and create a new Vue instance. And like before, we'll create a new Vue with the element set to the root element of app Vue. We'll create a data key here as well. And we'll return a variable called message, which will be of type string. This is a random message. Cool. Let's go back to our index.html. And in here, we want to just create an empty div container. And I'll just use an h4 to represent where we're going to be using our Vue model example. And inside of our Vue div container, let's actually do the two-way data binding. So I'll create a text area, and I'll just call this Vue model example here for the name, but it's not really required. And then ID, I'll just say another one, Vue model example 1, Vue model example. Cool. And the more important part is that we want to attach the Vue model directive to this text area. So I'll do something like Vue Model and set it equal to our message variable. Cool. By doing this, now any input event changes that I make on the text area will update the message variable. To confirm this, we could create a p tag under the text area and then reference to the instance variable of message by using the mustache syntax. Let's run the server and see how it goes. Cool. So we can see the text area and the p tag string of this is a random message, which are in sync together. So as I erase message, you'll notice that the string below it is disappearing as well. So this is why Vue Model is so powerful, is that the Vue Model directive allows you to attach onto form input events like input area, text area, and strings, and it could dynamically update data as needed. The second directive I want to go over is Beyond. Beyond can be used to listen to DOM events and run JavaScript code. It can also be used via method event handlers, but we haven't really discussed that yet, so we could probably talk about that in the future. But for this specific lesson, we'll just go with something very simple and just to show you the general use case for it. Cool. Below the message variable, I'm going to add another variable called counter, and it's going to be of number type, and we'll initialize it with 0. If we go back to our index.html, we'll create another empty div container below the Vue model example, and kind of following the same suit, we'll just say Beyond here. And then here, let's create 2 buttons. We'll call the first one add, and then we'll call the second one subtract. Cool. And then each button, we can actually attach a Vue on directive with a click handler. So if we do something like Vue on click, and then we could reference equal to counter, which was the variable we defined in our Vue instance, plus equal 1. So basically, whenever a user clicks on this specific button, it's going to look at what the counter variable value is, which is currently 0, and add 1 to it. And once it's set to 1, it's going to be 2. The more oftentimes you click it, from the same context and point of view, we could just do a Vue on click equals counter minus equal 1, and same concept. When the user clicks subtract, it should be subtracting 1 from the counter value. And then we could look at the result of this by once again adding a p tag below it, and then using our mustache syntax and looking at the variable counter. Let's run our server and see what happens. Cool. We see this little section here with the Beyond initialized at 0, and then we add, we subtract, and it goes negative. So as you can see, the Beyond directive is attached to a click handler that basically is changing the value of the counter variable. The last thing I want to talk about is shortcuts. Since Beyond is going to be heavily used throughout most of your applications, Vue gives you a little bit of a shortcut to kind of make up for this long syntax and just provide you better syntactic sugar. So instead of doing a V on click, you could actually just get rid of this this whole thing and just add a @ sign, and it pretty much represents the same thing. So if we go back to our code and then we do the add and then we do the subtract again, it's pretty much follows the same structure that we were doing before. To recap, Vue Model Directive creates a two-way data binding for form input, text area, and select elements. By attaching the Vue Model Directive to the input element, we create that handshake between the Vue instance data variable and that specific form input. Any changes that you make on that input will update that data. The Vue On directive allows you to attach event handlers like the click to the HTML elements. Once the event occurs, we can perform some JavaScript code. For our example, we were able to add and subtract from the variable counter, which was initialized as 0. And lastly, we introduced some shortcut syntax for commonly used directives by using the @ sign. That's the end of the 4th lesson. The next one will go over methods.